Hi guys, so I was just talking about distal taper, mentioning it in the first video preceding this, and then talking in more depth in the video just before this, and just to give some specific numbers, as an example I'm going to look at one actual antique sword with a tape measure in hand and one very good quality replica sword, and show that they follow a similar pattern although they're completely different sword types. And hopefully you'll get an idea from the numbers of the sort of distal taper that we're talking about in good quality swords. And just to reiterate once again that not all types of swords have significant distal taper. Not all swords have distal taper historically, but many types of, probably most types of good quality original swords from any period have some degree of distal taper to them. It is a very common feature of a good sword. So I've just picked an antique sabre here at random. This is an example from the 1880s made by Wilkinson sword of an 1854 pattern infantry officer's sword. And tape measure at the base of the blade, we're looking at 8.5mm thick at the base of the blade. A bit further up, about 12 inches up, we're looking at about 6mm thick. Then if we look at the centre of percussion, i.e. where you're going to cut with, we are looking at 4mm, or actually 4mm thick. Then just a little bit up from that it steps down to 3mm, and then near the tip down to 2mm. Okay, so we can see that in this type of sabre from the 1880s, this is an original made by Wilkinson Sword, pretty much the best British sword manufacturers and one of the best sword manufacturers in the world by that time. Starting at 8mm, going down to about kind of 6mm down here, down to about 4 or 5mm, down to 3mm and then 2mm. So you can see it's a fairly steady step downwards in thickness along the blade, and this ends up in a blade that's nice and whippy, nice and quick, very responsive, but still the whole weapon weighs 2 pounds, and I can guarantee you it will feel very different in the hand compared to a weapon that is made of a flat piece of steel that is the same weight and the same point of balance. Okay, the fact that it's not a flat piece of steel and that it has distal taper drastically improves both the handling of the sword and the cutting efficiency of it as well. Now to go to a good quality replica, I'll pick up my Albion. I used the long sword this time. I could use the one-handed sword. It's a similar story with the one-hander, but I'll use the long sword. So long sword here we have from Albion. This one's from Albion Europe, but Albion are actually an American company, but I bought this from the European outlet. So if we go to the base of the blade, we are looking at 1cm at the base. Bearing in mind this is a longer blade than the sabre, so you would expect it generally to start off thicker at the base to maintain the same degree of stiffness. Move up, let's say about 8 inches from the crossguard, and we're down to 8mm already. So you'll notice with this type of medieval blade, and this is very common and true to originals as well, bearing in mind that the Albions are designed by Peter Johnson, who's handled hundreds of original medieval swords, so he knows what he's doing, and that's why Albion makes swords that are like the originals. So we're down from 1cm down to about 8mm. Then the middle of the blade, more or less, we're down to probably about 4 or 5mm there, and down to definitely 4mm, possibly, yeah, 4mm there. This is quite a stiff blade incidentally because it has a lot of taper in this plane of the blade, so in this plane it doesn't need so much. And up about, we're about 8 or 9 inches from the tip, we're down to about 4, definitely 3 or 4mm there, and near the tip we're down to, still quite thick actually, quite surprising, still about 3 or 4mm at the tip. So what we've got there, what that tells us is a lot about the sword. This sword is not the world's best cutter, okay? Despite the fact it's a long sword, we've got 2 hands on it, this can probably cut, in fact I know because I cut with it, it can cut no better than a one-handed sabre. Okay, a one-hand sabre can cut just as well as this big longsword, but what they've really done with this longsword, the original design, is to create a very stiff blade optimised for thrusting through resistive materials like padding, under armour and mail, and of course using for half swording and other uses like this, and resisting against large weapons such as poleaxes and spears. So it's a very different kind of use to what the sabre would be used for. So this blade is optimised for stiffness and penetrating power, and they have, therefore, the cutting capacity on it is slightly reduced. But hopefully those numbers will show you that, you know, even a sword like this that is optimised for thrusting and stiffness goes from 1 centimetre down through 8 millimetres, probably about 6 millimetres, down to 5, down to 4, down to 3. Okay, so that's the kind of, again, it's a kind of straight line gradient of distal taper that you're looking at. And this is very, very common in original swords and good quality replicas. Okay, remember that cheaper replicas are generally flat, don't have enough distal taper, and are therefore too floppy, the weight is distributed in the wrong places, and it gives you a very wrong idea about how the original sword's handled. You need to try, if you can, by hook or by crook, to get your hands on original antique swords if you want to know what they feel like, because very often they will be lighter and handle in a more responsive and nicer way than you expect. I have to say, to caveat that last point of this video, is that not all original swords handle nicely. And I have mentioned this in a previous video, but you have to remember that a weapon is designed to do a job. It's not necessarily designed to feel pretty in your hand. Okay? And sometimes you need a sword to hit hard, or you need an axe or a mace to hit hard, and it won't feel pretty and nice in your hand and float around like stardust. It will feel like a clump of iron because it's designed for a specific purpose that is not to feel pretty in the hand. However, lots of original antique swords do feel nice in the hand as a function of being good weapons. Thank you.